I gave up everything for someone who couldn't even save me a seat. I moved cities. I changed my life. I built my world around one person. And when the biggest day of his life came, I wasn't there. Not because I didn't want to be, because he made sure I couldn't. I found out the way you find out the worst things, by accident. And when I asked him why, he didn't apologize. He didn't explain. He yelled. And that was the night everything changed. My name is Lena. I was 26 when I moved to London for him. Not for a job. Not for a dream. For a man named Oliver who told me, in the softest voice I'd ever heard, that he couldn't picture his future without me in it. That was the kind of thing that makes you pack your life into boxes. That was the kind of thing that makes you say goodbye to everything familiar and step into something terrifying, truly believing that you are stepping towards something real. I had been living in Edinburgh for most of my adult life. I had my routine, my friends, my small flat above a bakery on a street I could walk blindfolded. I had a job I loved. I was a freelance graphic designer, and I had spent 3 years building a client base that actually paid well. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. And when Oliver got accepted into a prestigious law program at King's College, he sat me down one evening in my kitchen, the one with the cracked tiles I kept meaning to replace, and he held my hands across the table and told me he wanted me there. Not eventually. Now. So I went. I let go of my clients one by one. I sublet my flat. I packed everything I owned into 4 suitcases and a box I labeled fragile in red marker, even though the most fragile thing I was carrying wasn't made of glass. I told myself this was love. I told myself this was what people do when something matters. And for the first few months in London, it did feel like it mattered. Oliver and I shared a flat in Brixton, small, loud, with neighbors who played music through the walls at midnight. But we were together, and that felt like enough. What I didn't see, what I couldn't see because he never let me, was how carefully Oliver managed the way other people perceived him. Started small. So small that I didn't even register it as a pattern. He introduced me to his university friends as his girlfriend, yes, but he steered conversations away from me. When I mentioned my design work, he'd change the subject, not rudely but smoothly. Expertly. Like someone practicing a magic trick. Group dinners, I noticed he never asked me what I thought about anything. He asked others. He leaned in when they spoke. He laughed at the right moments. But when I opened my mouth, the air in the room shifted just slightly, just enough that I started to feel like I was interrupting something. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself I was still adjusting to a new city, still grieving the life I'd left behind. I told myself that Oliver was just a private person, that not everyone processes intimacy the same way in public. I told myself a lot of things. That's what you do when you've already paid the price of admission. Oliver was studying hard. His final year was relentless. Late nights at the library, weekends spent in the university reading rooms, phone calls with study groups that ran past midnight. I didn't complain. I had moved across the country for this man. The least I could do was give him space to become whoever he was trying to become. So I built my own quiet life inside our flat. I picked up new clients. I redesigned my portfolio. I learned to fill the silence when he wasn't there and to shrink into it when he was. By the time spring came, Oliver was deep in preparation for his final exams, and more importantly, for his graduation. King's College graduations were a big deal. Every student's family flew in. The ceremony was held in a grand hall, and the whole event had a weight to it, a formality that made it feel less like a celebration and more like an arrival. Oliver talked about it constantly. He talked about how proud his mother would be. He talked about the outfit he was going to wear. He talked about the photos he wanted to take. He never once mentioned me being there. I noticed. Course I noticed. But I didn't say anything, not yet. I told myself there was time. I told myself he'd bring it up. I told myself that when the moment came, he would turn to me and say, "Obviously you're coming," and I would feel stupid for ever doubting it. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday. A thick, cream-colored envelope delivered to the flat, addressed to Oliver in elegant print. He opened it at the kitchen table while I was making coffee, and I watched him unfold the paper inside, a formal guest list template with spaces to fill in names. He looked at it for a long time, longer than it should have taken. Then he folded it carefully, slid it back into the envelope, and put it in his bag without a word. I didn't ask. Not that day. I asked 3 days later, on a Friday evening after I'd spent the entire week waiting for him to say something, anything. We were in the living room. He was scrolling through his phone. I was sitting on the other end of the sofa, and I asked him simply quietly, the way you ask a question when you already suspect the answer is going to hurt. Am I coming to your graduation? He didn't look up immediately. He finished whatever he was reading, locked his phone, and then looked at me. And in that look, in the half-second before he spoke, I saw something I had never seen in his face before. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't embarrassment. It was irritation. "Why are you asking me that right now?" he said. And that was the beginning of the end. "Why are you asking me that right now?" he said again, and this time there was an edge to it, not sharp but firm. Kind of tone that's designed to make you feel like you're the one causing a problem. I didn't back down. Not this time. "Oliver, your graduation is in 2 weeks. I haven't been mentioned once. I haven't been asked. I just want to know if I'm coming or not." He put his phone down on the coffee table, slowly, deliberately, and turned his body toward me. And I remember thinking, in that strange, hyper-aware way you think when something is about to crack open, that he looked almost rehearsed. Like he had anticipated this conversation and decided, somewhere in advance, exactly how he was going to handle it. "You weren't invited," he said. Flat. Clean. No padding around it. I stared at him. Not because I didn't understand the words. I understood them perfectly. I stared at him because I was waiting for the rest. The explanation. The reason. The thing that would make it make sense, because there had to be one. There had to be something I was missing, some logistical detail, some stupid bureaucratic rule about guest numbers that he'd been too embarrassed to bring up. There had to be something. "What do you mean I wasn't invited?" I said. "You fill out the guest list yourself. You told me that." And that's when he yelled. Not a scream. Not a breakdown. It was a controlled, sudden burst of volume, the kind of yell that's meant to shut a conversation down before it goes any further. His voice filled the small living room, and it bounced off the walls, and for a second I felt genuinely startled, the way you feel when a door slams behind you. "Because I didn't want you there, Lena," he shouted. "Because every time we go somewhere together, you make it about you. You always need to be included in everything, and I just wanted one day that was about me. Is that so hard to understand?" The room went very quiet after that. I sat there on that sofa, in that flat in Brixton with the loud neighbors and the walls that let everything in, and I felt something inside me shift. Not break, I want to be precise about that. Didn't break in the way people describe in films, like something shattering all at once. It was quieter than that. It was more like a door closing. Softly. Firmly. With a click. Because the thing he had just said, the thing he had just screamed at me, it wasn't new. It was the conclusion of something I had been living inside for over a year without fully naming it. Every time he changed the subject when I spoke. Every time he steered me away from his friends. Every time he filled a room with his presence and left just enough space for me to exist, but not enough space for me to be seen. It all made sense now. Not in a way that made it hurt less. In a way that made it hurt more, because it meant I hadn't been imagining it. I didn't cry. I want you to know that. Not because I was being brave or performing strength for an audience. I didn't cry because something in me had already gone quiet. The part that wanted to fight, the part that wanted to ask why, the part that needed him to understand what he had just done. All of it went silent at once, like a power cut. I looked at him for a long time. He was watching me, waiting, I think, for the reaction he expected. The tears. Questions. The desperate, pleading version of me that he had probably already scripted in his head. The version that would say, "Please, Oliver, I just want to be there for you," and give him the chance to be the generous one, the one who relents, the one who grants access. I didn't give him that. Instead, I stood up. I walked to the kitchen. I made myself a cup of tea. And I brought it back to the sofa and sat down and drank it slowly while he watched me with an expression that shifted, by degrees, from anger to something else. Something uncomfortable. Something close to confusion. "Are you just going to sit there?" he asked. "Yes," I said. And I did. That night, I lay in bed next to him and stared at the ceiling and felt, for the first time in over a year, completely, brutally clear. Not angry. Not sad. Clear. The way you feel when someone accidentally turns on a light in a room you've been sitting in the dark in and suddenly you can see everything. Every piece of furniture. Every crack in the wall. Every dust particle floating in the air. You can see exactly where you are. I started making a list in my head. Not of grievances, I wasn't interested in tallying up the ways he had hurt me. I was making a different kind of list. Practical one. A list of what I had given up and what I had left and what I could still take back. My design clients, some of them had stayed in touch. My Edinburgh friends, they texted me regularly, asked how I was, and I always said fine. My portfolio, I had kept it updated quietly out of habit. My savings, I had been careful even in London, even while building a life around someone else. I had not let myself become completely dependent. Not financially. Not professionally. I had kept one thin thread connecting me to the life I had before Oliver. And lying there in the dark, listening to him breathe beside me, I realized that thread was still intact. I didn't say anything to him the next morning. Or the morning after that. I didn't bring up the graduation. I didn't bring up what he had said. I didn't apologize, there was nothing to apologize for, and I didn't ask him to. I simply stopped. I stopped asking if he wanted dinner. I stopped waiting up when he came home late. I stopped filling the silences he left in conversations. I stopped adjusting myself to the shape of his life. And the strange thing, the thing that surprised me, was how easy it was. How naturally the silence settled, like dust after a storm. Like it had always been waiting there, underneath everything, and I had simply been too busy keeping it at bay. Oliver noticed. Course he did. Within a few days, he started to test the edges of it, asking me small questions, making comments designed to pull me back into the rhythm we'd had before. But I didn't pull. I answered when he spoke. I was polite. I was present. I was just no longer performing. And that, more than anything he had ever said to me, terrified him. The graduation was on a Saturday in late May. London was doing that thing it does in late spring, pale gold light coming through the windows, a warmth that feels borrowed, like the city is pretending to be somewhere else. I woke up early that morning. Oliver was already in the bathroom, getting ready. I could hear the tap running. Hear him moving around in there with the quiet, deliberate energy of someone preparing for an audience. I made coffee. I sat at the kitchen table. And I watched him emerge in his suit, dark navy, well cut, the kind of thing he had spent weeks choosing, and I felt nothing. Not bitterness. Not longing. Not even the dull ache of being excluded. I felt the way you feel when you look at a photograph of someone else's life and recognize, clearly and without drama, that it has nothing to do with yours. "I'll be back late," he said, grabbing his keys from the hook by the door. "Okay," I said. He paused. For just a second, a fraction of a second, something flickered across his face. He wanted me to say something else. Something that would confirm I still cared about the shape of his day, that I was still watching, still invested, still quietly devastated by my exclusion. He wanted to carry that with him into the ceremony. It would have made him feel important, the knowledge that somewhere, someone was sitting alone because of a choice he had made. I gave him nothing. He left. And the moment the door closed behind him, I picked up my phone and called my friend Saren. Saren was someone I had known since university in Edinburgh. Sharp, funny, the kind of person who listens to the whole story before she says a single word. I hadn't told her everything. Not yet. But I had told her enough, quietly over the past week in short messages late at night, that when I called her that Saturday morning and said, "I think I'm ready," she understood exactly what I meant. "Then do it," she said. Simply. No drama. No ceremony. I spent that afternoon doing something that felt, in the moment, almost mundane. I sat at my laptop at the kitchen table, the same table where Oliver had opened that cream envelope, and I began to dismantle the life I had built around him. Methodically. Quietly. The way you pack a suitcase when no one is watching. I contacted 2 of my old Edinburgh clients, designers I had worked with before, people who knew my work and trusted it. I emailed them a brief, professional note. I wasn't begging for work. I was reminding them that I existed and that I was available. Within an hour, one of them wrote back. Within 2, the other did as well. I called the landlord of my old flat in Edinburgh. It was still sublet, but the tenant's lease was ending in 6 weeks. I asked if I could move back in. He said yes without hesitation and asked me when I wanted to start. I looked at the flat around me, the Brixton flat, the one with the loud neighbors and the thin walls, and I realized I could be out of it in a week. Maybe less. I had never truly unpacked here. Not fully. Some part of me, some small, quiet, stubborn part, had always kept one foot on the door. Oliver came home late that night, as he had said he would. He was flushed, slightly drunk, riding the high of the evening, the applause, the photographs, his mother's proud tears. He wanted to tell me about it. I could see it in the way he moved through the flat, the way he dropped his jacket on the back of a chair with a looseness that said he was still inside the feeling. "It was incredible," he said, sitting down on the sofa. "My mum cried." "Her actual face, Lena, you should have," he stopped. Caught himself. Looked at me. And there it was. The realization. Not all at once. Oliver wasn't the kind of person who arrived at uncomfortable truths quickly. But it landed slowly, visibly, like a weight settling onto his chest. He had just told me I should have been there. He had, in the span of one sentence, contradicted the very reason he had given for keeping me away. I watched him understand this. I didn't help him with it. "I'm moving back to Edinburgh," I said. Not angrily. Not sadly. I said it the way you announce something that has already happened, because in every way that mattered it had. He tried to talk. He tried to explain, to reframe, to find the version of the story where he was still the reasonable one, the one who had simply needed space, the one who had been misunderstood. He said things like, "That's not fair and you're overreacting and can we just talk about this?" Each sentence was a door he was trying to open, a way back into the dynamic where I was the one questioning and he was the one deciding how much I deserved to be included. I didn't walk through any of them. I had already found a box that evening, a single cardboard box from under the bed, and I had begun slowly placing things inside it. Small things. My things. A mug I had brought from Edinburgh. A book I had been reading. Targer. A photograph of Saren and me from a trip we had taken years ago, printed and pinned to the corkboard above my desk. Each item I placed in the box was a sentence in a letter I was writing without words. Oliver watched me do this. He stood in the kitchen doorway with his arms at his sides and he watched, and I could see, clearly without any ambiguity, the moment he understood that this was not a fight. This was not something he could win or lose or negotiate his way through. This was simply the end of something. Quiet. Final. Irreversible. I left 2 days later. A Tuesday morning, early, before the city had fully woken up. I didn't leave a note. There was nothing left to say that hadn't already been said, or deliberately left unsaid. I took my 4 suitcases and my 1 cardboard box and I closed the door of that flat and I did not look back at it. Edinburgh was grey and damp when I arrived, and it felt, in a way I hadn't expected, like stepping back into a version of myself that I had set down gently on a shelf and simply forgotten to pick up. My old flat was waiting. My old clients were waiting. My old life, the one I had built with my own hands, the one that had never depended on anyone else's approval, was waiting. Oliver texted me in the weeks that followed. Not every day, but enough. Short messages at first, "Are you okay? And can we talk?" And then longer ones, the kind that reveal more about the sender than they intend to. He told me he missed me. He told me he had been thinking about what I said. He told me he was sorry, in the way people are sorry when they have finally realized that the person they took for granted is no longer there to take. I read every message, and then I did something that cost me nothing and took from him everything. I didn't reply. Not once. Not ever. Not with anger, not with closure, not with the final conversation he was looking for, the one where he could say the right thing and feel absolved. I gave him no ending. No resolution. No door to walk through and call it finished. I simply stopped existing in his life the way he had made sure I stopped existing in his. That was the revenge. Not loud. Not dramatic. Not the kind of thing anyone would notice from the outside. It was the quiet removal of access. The withdrawal of the one thing he had never considered he needed until it was gone, my attention. It has been 8 months now. I am back in Edinburgh. I am designing again, better work than before, work that feels like mine in a way it hadn't for a long time. I have dinner with Saren on Thursdays. I walk along the streets I used to walk blindfolded, and I feel not happy exactly, but settled. Grounded. Like someone who has finally stopped apologizing for taking up space. People ask me sometimes, when I tell this story, which I rarely do, whether I regret any of it, whether I wish it had ended differently, whether some part of me still hopes Oliver will find his way back to being the man who held my hands across a cracked kitchen table and told me he couldn't picture his future without me. And the honest answer is this: he never was that man. That man was a performance. A version of himself that was designed to make me stay, and it worked for a while. But the moment he thought I was permanent, the moment he believed I wasn't going anywhere, the performance ended. And what was left underneath it was someone who saw me not as a person but as an audience. I stopped being his audience. And that, in the end, was the only power I ever needed to take back.